fix Britain. The Eye goes with NHS sending patients to hotels to ease bed blocking. Front cover of The Guardian has a story, PPE gowns in 11 million order not safe for use in NHS. We'll be covering that in a while. The Times has Sunak, my 5 pledges to restore British pride. And the front cover of The Sun goes a little rogue with the Virgin Mary gives birth in Peterborough. And the Daily Star finally, I have a cunning plan, PM, to fix the NHS, cut debt and cut immigration, but he can't say exactly when. And those were your front pages. And we're going to kick things off with the main story of today. And the front page of the Daily Mail, Josh, what have they got?
Yeah, so most of the papers are covering this, Rishi's speech. There is a slightly confusing thing at the top of the page of Mail where it says, want this paper for just 33p, but then the paper costs 90p. So I don't know if they're going to give them money back for this particular edition. It's upset me. I spent about an hour staring at that, trying to figure that out.
You're going to have to subscribe to work out what it is.
Well, there's 65p to subscribers, but does that mean I get 32p? Anyway,
it's a mathematical nightmare.
It's like, I don't know if I'm going to have to take this paper back to get... Anyway, whatever it is. But the big thing here, Rishi, judge me on my 5-point plan to fix Britain. And what he says about it is he says there's no tricks and there's no ambiguity, except for the fact that it is tricks and it is very ambiguous. So if you look at each of the different points here, like halving the inflation, well, inflation is going to basically go down anyway, essentially. It's reached its peak and it's basically going to go down.
Yeah.
The second one, growing the economy. Already, they're saying the recession is probably going to last about a year. So even then, it's just like, what he's promising is to not make things worse.
I see.
If he just didn't do anything, these things would pretty much happen.
There was something a bit odd about his speech as well. I mean, he was saying things like, you know, we'll either achieve our goals or we won't. We'll do all this stuff for you, or maybe we won't.
In a stilted way as well. It was like he got the intonation wrong, like he was reading the autocue.
It felt like he didn't care. It's like, we might do it, maybe he just might not bother.
Yeah, and just judge me how it is. He's got, you know, a year and a half, essentially, reducing debt. Like, at the moment, it's the largest it's ever been. He has to do, he's got no choice but to do that, the amount we're paying interest on that. Cutting waiting lists, they're saying it's going to already reach a peak, and so it's going to go down anyway as we're dealing with the backlog of COVID. The big one, and the other one at the end, is stopping the boats. Let's see if they're doing that. I'm sure Nick's got stuff to talk about here on this, but passing this new laws to stop small boats, and I'm just wondering where the loophole's going to come in.
Well, let's see, Nick, do you have all the answers?
Let's go, big dog.
I've got all the answers, yes, but they're not good. I mean, the thing about you'll be able to judge us or not, he's creating the illusion of hard targets that we can judge them on, but they're actually not hard targets. As Josh said, there is tricks, there is ambiguity. So inflation, as Josh said, is predicted to halve anyway, so that's that one. He says he'll grow the economy, but that's only from where we are, which is in a probable recession, if we have a second confirmed quarter of contraction. So it's not much hard to grow it from a recession. Number 3, reduce debt. He means in 5 years, and he also means as a percentage of GDP. He doesn't mean the total national debt. And also, it could be that it's going up and up and up for 4 years, then it's falling. He said it has to be falling. Make sure debt is falling. So because of that phraseology, it means that it just can be falling in the 5th year and it'd still qualify. The waiting list, well, yes, as Josh said, we've just had an emergency, an unprecedented crisis, so of course you'd expect they'd gradually reduce the backlog anyway, so that's that one. And then lastly, stop the boats. Well, if you look at it, he said we'll pass a law to stop the boats, which only means they'll pass a law. It doesn't mean he'll do anything. And of course, he has the power to pass that law, so that's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So he could literally just sit there and do nothing, and all of his pledges will have been realised.
He could, and after all that, I'll still get called a Tory on Twitter. That's the incredible thing, despite spamming every one of these pledges.
I mean, Josh, there is something about this, you know, stopping the boats and everything. I mean, we had a lot of very sort of fierce rhetoric about this kind of stuff from Priti Patel when she was Home Secretary, from Suella Braverman. But ultimately, you know, last year it says it was up 60% to the previous year, to 45,000 people crossing. So it does look like they don't know how to stop this, even if they want to.
No, and it is an issue. It does have to be dealt with. I haven't heard from anybody, really, including Labour, how exactly this stuff is going to be dealt with. People want to come into this country for a variety of reasons, but there's economic purpose there. And I don't know, this small boats thing is going to be the thing.
I think let's just blame the French.
Always, yeah,
I think that's probably the sensible thing to do. We're going to turn to The Guardian now, Nick. What has The Guardian got on its front cover for us on Thursday? Well,
Guardian's going with PPE gowns in 122 million order, not safe for use in NHS. And all I have to ask here is, what has Michelle Mone done to The Guardian? Because it is a big story, but it's just a new story every day. Michelle Mone's still bad. And this one, it seems like, I wouldn't say scraping the barrel, but it's, they're going for this thing about this gowns and whether they were sterile. So the Department for Health and Social Care paid the company PPE MedPro 122 million for these sterile surgical gowns. But the accusation is that they were not, in fact, sterile, and the labelling of them was false. So the Guardian are going after it again, and they've commenced legal action against Moan and or PPE MedPro, I suppose. Sorry. And, of course, Moan had nothing to do with it. I should be very clear. Completely separate. But I love their defence, which is that they passed quality inspection in China. It's like, yeah, so did the COVID-19 virus. You know what I mean? I wouldn't necessarily go with that. If you said, like, Switzerland, you know what I mean? Something like that.
But I think it is quite a big deal because it's 122 million. Her husband, I think he got 80 million.
Yeah.
She and the kids gets 29 million. So that money essentially is connected there.
I think it's fair enough for the Guardian investigate. I don't think it's a personal vendetta. I think
but the point
it is newsworthy.
The point is, if that stuff, if the product that was sort of arranged behind, you know, she dropped in the ear, oh, you should check out this company, all of this, and then suddenly he makes all these millions. The point is, the product that was delivered, or some of it, the mask was supposedly okay, but the 122 million was stuff that we couldn't actually use anyway, and we had to pay millions to store it.
All right, well, we should also say on the front cover of The Guardian there the image of Faye Weldon, who unfortunately has died, aged 91. Absolutely brilliant novelist. We're going to move on now to the front page.
You're a big fan? Have you read all of her books?
I've only read one, actually.
Which one?
But it was brilliant. Life and Loves of the She-Devil.
Oh, yeah, everyone's got to read that.
But,
It says...
I should read the second one, because I met her once and she signed a copy of another book of hers, but I never got around to reading it. So I should actually now read
Maybe
that.
that's why she died of heartbreak.
Let's not speculate on that. Let's move on to the front cover of The Times now, and Josh has got the lowdown on this.
NHS sending patients to hotels to ease bed blocking. So this sounds like an NHS issue, but really it's actually more about social care, which isn't integrated to their two different systems here. There's a massive shortage of people taking care of elderly, essentially, but not just the elderly. So what they're doing is the NHS, and they're taking up a lot of beds in the NHS, in hospitals, so they're sending them off to private facilities. And actually, as it turned, these sort of hotels run by private healthcare companies, and it actually does save the NHS a lot of money because an NHS bed costs about £2.5 grand a week, but one of these care hotel beds costs about £1,000 a week, as opposed to a residential home, which is £520. So it's still not ideal, but actually it does economically work out. It's just sad that this system has just been allowed to run on and get decrepit as...
I mean, do you have any thoughts on this one, Nick?
Well, yeah, just that it's tough, isn't it, to put them in care hotels when you've already got all the illegal migrants in the hotels. And I'm wondering, like, how will there be enough space?
Are you catastrophising a little bit there?
What about people who actually just want to stay in a hotel? Where do they go anymore?
Yeah, I know. It's just a classic headline from the failed state. NHS sending patients to East Bed, to hotels.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand you need to do it, though, for the reasons Josh has outlined. It is a necessary thing. It just sounds a bit mad.
I know. OK, we're going to move on to the front page of The Times now. Who's got this one? This one on strikes?
OK, I can do this. Strike law lets bosses sack workers and sue unions. So Rishi is proposing a new law to allow this minimum service level thing. Now, they do it in France and Spain. It doesn't necessarily make it a good thing, of course, especially France. But this is the idea. You'll have a certain minimum level, so you can't necessarily strike. And I think it's a good idea for things like the tube, where it is total economic chaos and disruption.
Yes.
If you don't have a certain minimal service, you could argue it's sort of anti-worker. But I suppose the problem is unions have so much power and they can make an unreasonable demands. Now, it still won't be the case for NHS workers because they're worried about a legal challenge if they try to ban strikes. What it'll do is it'll set these minimum levels so that strikes...
They're not banning strikes, are they? They're just saying, there has to be some service still running when it comes to these fundamental
If they're essential services, yeah.
But on the other hand, Josh, can a strike be effective if the strike isn't disruptive?
Well, there's a difference, I guess, between disruptive and people dying. And maybe that's the argument here. But the two of the things sound somewhat sensible. Doubling the minimum notice from 14 days, that sounds like a good idea. It's 28 days there, give people a bit of more warning. And also reducing the 6-month limit for industrial action. So basically, once they have decided to, they've done the ballot and it's yes, that gives them 6 months. So taking that down so they can strike any time from that 6 months. But if they take that down a bit, it means they'd have to do another ballot, and maybe the people in the union feel differently. So
you're although you are supportive of workers'
some
rights,
strikes.
Yeah, but everyone has a right to withhold their labour, don't they? But when it comes to the potential dangers of that, you think
Except
that should
train
be...
drivers.
Except train drivers, yes. They do mess things up rather, don't they? Well, it does work, as you say, Nick, in France and Germany. And Spain, I think they do it as well.
But there's a bit of a big story here that I haven't seen in the other papers, which is about how household energy bills are going to be forecast to be far less than expected in the second half of this year, which coincidentally is when the summer is. That might be part of the reason why. But that sounds like really good news.
That is excellent news there.
Help Sunak.
We're going to move...
meet those promises.
We're going to move on now to the sun. And what on earth is this about, Josh?
Well, this is the sun morphing into the star.
It has been, hasn't it, lately?
Yeah, definitely. They just don't cover news anymore. They got a picture there of Kelly Brook on her body then and now. I can happily talk about that for quite a long time if you want me to.
So just that a woman has aged?
Oh, that looks like your...
But that's one of the classic.
That looks like your poster when I went to your house.
Yes, you joke about that, but... But the story is that a woman who was pregnant bought a costume online and went as, hey, guys, isn't it funny? I'm going to dress as the Virgin Mary, went to the family for Christmas and then actually had the baby there. So...
That's what happens if you
well
mock
done,
God.
son.
I mean, that's blasphemy,
news.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
She was engaging in blasphemy and God smote her.
Well, she is Jewish, so no.
The only thing is, at least they know the nativity story. That's the positive I've got from it. Even though they were mocking God and tempting him, and he said, all right, fine, have the baby now. Yeah. But at least they actually knew the basic story.
And that means the kid's going to be born on Christmas Day. That's a total pain.
It is.
You know, double Christmas presents.
Did she go to the hospital dressed like that?
That would be funny.
Because then they should have said, there's no room here. Well, you have to go and give birth at the stable around the
corner. They have to go to a care hotel down the road.
They did commit the worst crime, which is said, we've got a bit of a sense of humour in our family.
Oh, no.
We're crazy.
Oh, no.
But the guy didn't want to dress up as Joseph because it was more expensive.
Yeah.
Well, why? What did Joseph wear? Lots of bling? I think he just wore a cowl or something.
Well, the Catholic, you tell me.
It doesn't actually specify in the Bible what he's wearing.
Okay.
No, it's very low on the details when it comes to couture.
It's the war on men, Andrew.
That's what it's all about.
Too expensive.
OK, that's it for part one. Join us after the break for freedom of expression, insulting cartoons and a Tory row. That's Headliners Bingo right there. See you in 2.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess I've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Thursday's newspapers. I'm still Andrew Doyle, and I'm still joined by Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. So let's kick off this section of the show with Thursday's Telegraph. And does this one signify something much deeper than simple political oscillations? Nick?
Yes, this is about the Reform Party. Tories should be smashed and destroyed at next election, says Richard Tice. And he hopes we're seeing the dying days of Conservative rule. Now, he does acknowledge that they bear the scars of the choice to back the Tories at the last minute over Brexit in 2019, and apparently people are still giving him hassle about that, a bit like the Lib Dems, on a more minor level, the Lib Dem coalition decision. So it's very interesting because it says reform could take 8% of the national vote, which is significant, and that's without Farage coming back. So imagine if he came back, it could be huge. And
that's roughly the same as the Greens and the Lib Dems.
Well, there you go. They could even become the third party. Yeah. And if we had proportional representation, they'd be more powerful. But it's interesting. And the thing is, what kind of party are they? If you look at their actual policies, now at least they've got targets. So Rishi didn't have a set target, whereas Tice has said he would get NHS waiting lists down to 0 within 2 years, which is very bold. They've also said that they'll put the income tax threshold from 12,570 to 20,000. And they'd also give no income tax for a short time or for a certain period. I think it might be 3 years for frontline workers, right, which is interesting. Yeah, for 3 years.
In the NHS, yeah.
Yeah. So these are interesting ideas, but they are not actually conservative necessarily. What they are, those ideas wouldn't be, out of place in the old Lib Dem party. You could say they're sort of a Thatcherite or a certain strand of Thatcherism. But Tice is actually quite keen to say that they're not right wing. He says we're right in the sense that we've got the right solutions, but we're not right wing. Yeah. We're not and right of centre on everything. So. Yeah, so they're a new party, but they're not actually a Conservative party. But they are arriving because of the failures of the Conservative party to do anything Conservative.
But they've also,
they're
not. Well, like you say, the Conservatives aren't really Conservative anymore. So people are looking for other options. More and more right-leaning people are openly criticising the Conservatives. I think at the last poll, the majority of Rishi Sunak's own support base weren't sure about voting Conservative anymore, or were not confident in the current government. So it's not looking good, is it? But what do you think, Josh, about this idea about these smaller parties? We would need, wouldn't we, a system of proportional representation in order for them to make any kind of impact, really?
Well, they are going to have an impact, because if they are fighting those red wall seats, that's going to split the Tory vote.
Right.
And so that is going to give those, or help to give those seats back to Labour. So they do have power somewhat.
Yeah.
And you know what? Some of these ideas, they're good ideas. I mean, look, someone else may come along and persuade me differently and say, oh, well, that's a terrible idea. But this idea of, not of people in the NHS, frontline workers, not paying income tax for 3 years, that seems like a fair, good idea to me.
Yeah.
Why not listen to what different people are saying?
And the Greens are self-imploding anyway, so I don't think...
Because there's two obvious points of weakness with the Tories. One is that they're not Conservative at all, but the other is just they've been generally incompetent. But they're very much focused on the incompetence side. Yeah. So I wonder if we'll ever actually get an actual Conservative party that comes up. That's not even on the table.
No, it's not. There's no one in that...
And the other thing is, but he's saying that, he wants to see the dying days, or we are seeing the dying days of them, and he wants them to be smashed and destroyed. I don't want that, and I'm a traditional Labour supporter, but you need a viable opposition for a functioning democracy.
Yeah. You need choice, don't you?
But he's, of course, saying it'll be reform versus Labour.
Well, that's it. But, I mean, realistically, it's not.
It's not going to be, surely. Anyway, we're going to move on to Thursday's Times now. Is everything OK in Scotland, Josh? What's this about?
Is anything OK in Scotland?
No, not really.
Index on censorship. Freedom of expression under threat from police. Now, we've covered this on the show. You've covered it on Free Speech Nation. This whole non-crime hate incident.
Yes.
Essentially, the gist being that if someone feels offended or feels like they've been attacked, that's enough to get one of these things. Now, it's technically as it says here, it's a non-crime, but it gets marked as a hate incident. It goes on the register. Someone's name is recorded somewhere for it. Now, this in England and in Wales, I believe it's been essentially the College of Policing have been told to stop promoting it.
Oh, it's been scotched now, yeah. I mean,
but it hasn't been scotched in Scotland.
Well, this is weird, isn't it? So the policing minister here, Chris Philp, has actually said this month, I believe, he was saying that he was going to instruct all chief constables
but it's not stopping them
to record non-crime, and I think that will work now because they've had enough of this.
Yeah.
But in Scotland, it's the reverse, and the Scottish police have a database of jokes that people have told online, and they don't tell them they've got them on this database, but these are problematic jokes, offensive jokes, and the police are monitoring this. Why? Why are the police in Scotland, Nick, so much more draconian than anywhere else in the United Kingdom?
Well, yeah, Scotland are just more draconian and sort of lefty authoritarians, aren't they? And everything we do, they want to do differently. It seems to be going that way, and it's Sturgeon. But, yeah, Police Scotland claimed in 2020 that there wasn't a culture where jokes and freedom of speech were curtailed, and yet you had Dankula getting, arrested, and he's lost his appeal, I believe, under that Section 127 of the Communications Act, which is a little different from this, but it's the same ballpark. This is the non-hate what is it, hate crime?
Non-crime.
Yes.
Yeah.
What if you're the average police officer investigating a non-crime? Do you not think to yourself, "Hang on, I'm now a non-policeman doing a sort of something that's non-necessary"?
Exactly.
Why? It's just so.
Well, it's worse than that because, as is pointed out by the Scottish Conservative chairman, police officers are the lowest number since 2008 in Scotland, and the fact that they're wasting their time recording this is ridiculous.
There's something really wrong in Scotland, though, because it's not just about the policing. I mean, it's often the Scottish police that put out those tweets saying, "Oh, you be careful, don't say anything offensive online or we'll come after you." But it's also the fact that the SNP have pushed through some of the most draconian anti-free speech measures we've ever seen, including their hate bill last year, which criminalises things that people say in the privacy of their own home, for God's sake.
Yeah, but you know why this is. The modern left don't believe in free speech, so that's... Or a section of the left, obviously not you guys. But yeah, look, and Gary Ritchie says here, a hate incident is any incident which is perceived by the victim or any other person to be motivated wholly or in part by malice. So it's a postmodern rule, it's perception of the victim. So it's a sort of weird subjective postmodern law and also, or pseudo law, and of course can be abused by bad actors because as soon as you perceive that I've said something to you with malice, that's it.
And what if you perceive it wrong, but you're already being called a victim by the police? Therefore, they've already made a decision that your perception was correct.
Chaos.
It's absolute mess.
I'm just worried about gigging ever again in Scotland because they are my audience are victims.
They are.
And
they come out crying.
I don't want to get arrested for it, or at least to have my name.
Oh, come on, that would help your sales.
The only way to deal with it, Josh, immediately after the gig, you have to report the entire audience. Get in first. Yeah, I'm the victim.
That joke. You've hurt my feelings.
Anyway, we're going to move on to Thursday's Mail now, and the Channel 4 sell-off looks to be off. Nick, is that right?
Yeah, plans to sell off Channel 4 are dropped as Culture Secretary Michelle Donlan says it was not the right decision. And, of course, Nadine is fuming. Nadine Dorries, this was one of her big ideas, or she was part of, with Boris, of pushing this through aggressively. But it's not going to happen because a few reasons. They're saying the economy will take an unnecessary hit, production companies lose money. Instead, Donlan's saying, let's give Channel 4 the ability to make more of their own programmes, which... You can only imagine what those will be like. Because at the moment, it's all external production companies. So they're saying, let them do their own programmes. They're saying the government will help them find new ways to get revenue. But I suppose the opposition to Channel 4 is because they've sort of gone so downhill and they make mainly sort of woke bills. You think about Channel 4, they used to be great in the 90s, Brass Eye, things like that. Then it sort of went lowbrow and people like Stuart Lee attacked it. And then it went sort of just woke. And so it's just gone downhill and even further.
It's weird to think that it's owned by the taxpayer, effectively.
Yeah.
Given that it just pushes out...
But I do want to point out, it doesn't cost the taxpayers any money. No. And that was the argument that Nadine was sort of almost trying to push through, which is it just wasn't true. And it was like she'd say, we're just trying to make it sustainable. Well, no, it is sustainable. So
your view is we just let it keep going?
We let it keep going. Well, it pays for a huge part of our independent sector in the media. So it was ridiculous for her. It's not saying that it's perfect, but it's not costing any of us a penny.
We don't have to watch it. It's just like one of those evangelical channels that you just don't watch because it is an evangelical channel now. It's an ideological
And who knows?
thing.
But then it shifts over time. As you said, it's great. It has periods that are good, periods that are bad.
Yeah, we might
maybe things will change again. It may be.
I'm in a dark age of Channel 4.
Let's just see if they offer me a contract or not.
Well,
I'm very happy here.
That's what this is really about, isn't it, Josh?
Don't burn any bridges, Andrew. BBC.
I've already done that. Thursday's Guardian now, and this is Iran not happy with France.
Well,
Josh,
I don't mind burning this bridge. I don't think it's going to affect me too much.
No.
Iran warns France over insulting cartoons depicting Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. So Charlie Hebdo, who essentially poking the bear again, and respect to them because 12 of their staff got murdered for drawing cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. And this time they've gone after Khamenei, and in support of the protest movements that have been going on in Iran.
Yeah, I understand they ran a competition to see who could draw the most offensive caricature of the Supreme Leader of Iran, which is a funny thing to do, right? But, of course, tyrants never like being mocked.
Well, no, and their thing is that they're doing sort of classic projection because they've called in the French government or the French ambassador and said that you've done this and we're going to, like I say, we're not going to let this go without effective response. Like the French government can control its media.
Yeah.
Iran may control its media. That doesn't mean other countries.
So this is a problem, isn't it? This is a bit like when President Erdogan of Turkey tried to have that German satirist extradited, or tried to get the German government to arrest him because he mocked him. And they almost considered it. I remember Angela Merkel almost considered it. This is really bad, isn't it? The Iranians sort of stepping in and saying to France, you should respect our own law, because they've got a law that you're not allowed to mock the supreme leader. But that law doesn't apply to us.
No. Well, it'll be very interesting, Andy, to see the response to this, because, in my opinion, the response to the 2015 incident with Charlie Hebdo was somewhat muted in certain quarters, because people are sort of squeamish about free speech now in much of the West.
Yeah.
But in this case, it'll be interesting to see if it's more aggressive, because it's versus the Iranian regime. Whereas before, you had free speech pitted against the general sensitivities around Muslims. What you have here is free speech versus the sort of oppressive Iranian regime that oppresses women. So I wonder if people will be a bit more bold when it comes to this, because you see the difference.
Yeah.
So I think people might be a bit more bold, but in general, I think people have been a bit pathetic about defending free speech. And it always depends, doesn't it? It's like, oh, the burqa's brave if it's here, but it's oppressive if it's in Iran, or the lockdown protests are bad here, but good in China. So it's will be interesting to see where the sort of hypocrisy falls.
It will be. I mean, the foreign minister here, he's saying this. He's saying, we will not allow the French government to go beyond its bounds. What does that mean? That sounds like a threat.
Yeah, of course it's an absolute threat. And they have agencies around the world. They do interfere, certainly much more in the Middle East, but this is what they've been doing. And that's why, in the UK, we're going to make the Guards an illegal organisation, which is about time, terrorist organisation.
I think, thank goodness for Charlie Hebdo, because, you know, people in power need to be mocked. And that's the point of being a satirist.
Yeah, and the fact that French people aren't funny is neither here nor there.
Well, that's your own subjective view there, Nick. We're going to move on now to this story. Thursday's Mirror. Is Britain losing its marbles? I'm not the first to have made that pun.
No, but perhaps the last. This is the British Museum in constructive talks with Greece over return of Elgin marbles. This is this weird thing where George Osborne has popped up. Who knows why? And he's sort of loaning them. He said, I'm not going to give you the marbles back because that sort of goes against our agreement, but I might loan them to you, sort of in a pub or something, or a back alley.
George Osborne just not do or say anything ever again.
That would be okay.
Involved in our cultural institutions.
We should probably clarify for the viewers if they don't know. The Elgin marbles are the marbles that were taken from the Parthenon and have been in the British Museum for a long time.
Taken, inverted commas.
Well, OK, so let's have a look. These are the image of the marbles. No.
And
very funny. Can we see the proper marbles?
Those are the ones that George Osborne will probably bring.
Those are the proper marbles. So the thing about these is they were... Now, Josh is sceptical about me saying they were taken, but my understanding was that when Elgin took these marbles from the Parthenon, it was agreed with the authorities at the time. It wasn't theft in the way that we would now understand it, because it was sanctioned, right? Yeah. And the argument, effectively... Well, it goes back and forth. But one of the arguments is that, you know, ever since the British Museum have had these, they've kept them in a good condition. They would have been worn away by the elements if they'd remained on the Parthenon. On the other hand, they do belong, really, in Athens.
Well, the argument goes that they're all of our heritage, like Western society's heritage. Is the idea, and the more people would see them here in London than would see them in Athens.
So it's not about reparations, necessarily?
No, it isn't about reparations. They're talking, like I said, he's talking about loaning them back, or they're sort of talking about doing an exchange.
Yeah.
I actually went to see them just for Christmas because I was a chaperone for my my son's school trip.
Okay.
You did the joke about marbles. For many years, I did think that they were big.
You actually thought they were marbles?
I thought they were not marbles, but I thought they were. I envisioned them being big balls made out of marble.
Were you very disappointed when it was all these centaurs and everything?
Yeah. Well, now I know everything about the whole thing.
Centaurs and
I had the frieze, and I know all the different things. We spent the day. It was great. So it is really important.
What do you make of this? Should we return these to Athens?
No. The thing is, I don't trust George Osborne really, but I also don't trust Greece to give them back after. I see this a bit like a gangster movie. George Osborne will show up with a big sports bag full of probably normal marbles or something. Yeah. He puts it down, they look at it, and everyone starts shooting at each other. That's how I see it. I just don't trust the whole deal.
I don't think that's going to happen.
It'll be broadly like that.
I mean, it might be. I have to say that have you been to the Acropolis Museum in Athens?
Not.
Okay,
I'm from a comprehensive school.
If you go there,
the telly,
and where it is located is absolutely beautifully situated, so you can where the marbles are kept now, which is not at the Parthenon. You can see where they should, where the Parthenon is, and it's so wonderfully sort of situated and arranged. I do think there would be a kind of innate poeticism about the Elgin marbles being in their original location at the Acropolis Museum. I do think that would be the case, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, look, you can afford to go to Greece. Good for you, mate.
You just went to Norway. You just come back from Norway.
Don't Norway shame me.
Don't you be giving me this grief. Anyway, part 2.
Willis.
It's at an end. Coming up, we've got Romeo and Juliet, people looking older than they actually are, and unreasonable job requests. And that's just us 3.
Hey.
See you in 2 minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Thursday's newspapers. Let's get back into it with Thursday's Times now. And forget star-crossed lovers, these two are very cross stars.
Hey, Romeo and Juliet film actors sue Paramount for sex abuse after 1968 nude scene. So this isn't the Claire Danes and Leonardo DiCaprio.
The Baz Luhrmann.
Yeah, the Baz Luhrmann.
This is the Franco Zeffirelli one.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Thank you for pronouncing that name for me. The actresses, whatever, two actors,
Yes.
whatever you want to call them now, 71, 72, they filed a claim. They want to get $500 million. They're saying that that it was sexual abuse. Now, when you read their ages, Hussey, who was 15, and Whiting, who was 16.
Yes.
And they were essentially told that they would be wearing like a sort of flesh-covered bodysuit, and then they were told that they'd have like pain. The guy was dodgy. Like, there's no doubt that, and he was like, no, it's authentic or whatever. But Hussey then, in 2018, said to Variety, nobody my age had done that before, and saying that it was he shot it tastefully and it was needed for the film. So here we are 4 years later.
Well, is it because they've changed the law, haven't they? And suddenly the statute of limitations has been lifted. And so now you can do this. But also, of course, Franco Zeffirelli is dead. I mean, he died a few years ago.
Yeah.
And so he's not able to defend himself. So I'm a bit nervous about that respect, because there isn't, because it's very one-sided. And
I mean, but the fact is, as a 15-year-old, and I believe that you do see her breasts in the film.
Do you?
That's a fact. And
I mean, I have seen the film,
and
but I
you
don't
see
recall
his
that.
butt. Do you remember that bit?
I watched it when I was a kid, so I really don't remember those kind of things. I would have blocked those elements out because I was very prudish as a child. Of course. What do you think, Nick?
Well, the problem is Hollywood did all this sleazy stuff, and now it's given us the post-Me Too era. Basically, they did genuinely gross stuff, and now we can't wolf whistle on the street because there's been an overreaction the other way.
You missed that, Nick.
Yeah, of course. But this stuff was gross. This is why we had to do this overcorrection, because all this kind of thing went on. Obviously, you've got a 15 and 16-year-old, you should never do this, and the excuse that it's art doesn't stack up to me. And Hollywood is known for doing this. There's a very disturbing movie called An Open Secret, and they get these young people, and it's kind of, this is normal in Hollywood, young people, underage people. There's a lot of dodginess in Hollywood, as we know.
But the point is, Nick, we don't know if this happened or not. This is the point. We've got an allegation here. We don't have proof.
No, we do.
Oh, do we?
Well, there's a film. There's the scene itself. That's what I'm saying. So it did happen.
But whether they were duped
Whether they were duped, I suppose.
Okay.
Well, either way, it was...
let's not get sued by the estate of Zeffirelli. The allegations, they were duped into it,
That's what I'm saying. I'm just always keen to emphasise these are allegations at this stage, That's
OK, well, you still had naked minors on film. That's not good.
No, I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying, it's interesting.
That's what you're saying to me. No,
but when you get these historical cases, when people go back like decades and decades ago, you just sort of think, well, why didn't you raise this before then? Why not?
Sure. I mean,
because then give the people a chance to defend themselves.
Yeah, and they're saying how traumatised they were by it. Like I said, using her own words, but I don't know. Also, maybe they just want to make a bit of money for their grandkids or whatever.
Who on earth knows? Anyway,
either way, it's not good what happened.
We're going to move on to the Mail now. This is a debate for the ages. Nick, what's this?
So this is a sort of tweet that blew up. People can't believe what 45-year-olds looked like in the 90s as photo of Steve Martin and Diane Keaton in Father of the Bride goes viral. And basically, Steve Martin, I don't know if we have it, but he had sort of grey hair in it. Perfectly cool to have grey hair, by the way. It happens to people at very young ages. And there you go.
Why does that look like a 45-year-old?
Well, so the argument is that, like, if you think about Kim Kardashian now, she's something like 42, and she's 42.
Yeah, but she doesn't dress like a typical 42-year-old,
yeah, but the claim is... I mean, look...
But that looks like someone in their 60s,
no,
70s.
It doesn't.
The argument is...
It does.
That's just an upper-middle-class couple.
No, but 45... I'm 46. Am I 46? Yes, I'm 46. Like, when I only dress like this because of you guys, because you've been up in your...
I don't understand why.
Sartorial
I don't understand.
skills.
Do you want me to explain?
Basically, they look old. They look much old. People who are 46... You know what I look like when I'm walking around the office. I got my baseball cap on and whatever. I'm older than that. What? And so I dress like a child. People in their 40s dress like kids nowadays.
No, Josh has basically just said it, yeah. I mean, it was different. Adults were adults then. People are now perpetual children. I mean, I'm saying this as someone who, lives alone and has the views of a teenage Andrew Tate fan. But the point is, they actually look like adults, is the argument. And she was wearing pearls and stuff, and he had grey hair that wasn't dyed, and they didn't all have hair transplants and stuff like that, I guess.
Seems like a nothing story. To me,
how dare you, Andrew?
I know people. I don't know. I know people at that age who dress like that.
On the top
I saw that tweet and I was like, "Whoa, that is really weird." No, because it is an indication of sort of this constant focus on youth and how
which I admit is not healthy.
And an inability to grow up.
OK, all right. We're going on to Thursday's Mirror now, and it seems that a university has got its priorities crooked. Josh, what's this?
Really? Yeah. Students slam greenwashing. At least they do some kind of washing, those students. Hey, university for spending £24,000 on a Greta Thunberg statue.
24 grand?
24 grand, a bronze. They made it out of bronze, the most neutral metal
Look at that. Why not just paper mache? That would have been better. That's an insane amount of money.
That is an insane amount of money. Yeah. And so now they're being criticised by, and this is the University of Winchester, and they have been criticised by members of the Labour Society, the Allotment Society and the Sustainability Society. Wow. Now, why is there a student allotment society? That terrifies me, number one. I'm just imagining them all in their jumpers down the allotment with posters of Jeremy Corbyn on the wall. That's a little bit weird. But they've got a point here where it sounds like the university are just doing some virtue signalling, spending the money on this stuff and not doing what they think is stuff that's going to actually help the planet.
So what if they gave that money to, environmental causes instead?
They could do that, Andrew. Then we couldn't have this beautiful statue of Greta. And what you don't know is if you pull a string on the back of it, it says, "How dare you?" So it's quite
That's
brilliant.
Cool, actually.
Yeah, and it makes sense to have the statue of Greta because she's our queen now, and she's a saint. And actually, they're going to rename, I believe, University of Winchester. They're going to rename the whole town of Winchester St. Gretersburg, and I approve.
How old is Greta now?
20.
She must have just turned 20.
So she's still quite young. She still doesn't necessarily know who she is or what she really thinks about the world. What happens if in 5 years' time she has a completely anti-environmental view of the world? There's all these statues to her and everything. It's very likely she'll change her mind.
What would be amazing if she went and toppled her own statues,
right?
And
Exactly.
spray painted them with right-wing messages.
That might happen because we were
it's
all
a hoax.
Yeah, we were all hugely different when we were 20.
I thought only
I think
far
it's
left
likely.
toppled statues.
The only thing is that's true. The only thing is that her dad sort of seems to... Her dad apparently runs her Twitter. Can't confirm that. That's satire. But, she's not really doing any of it anyway, is she, Andrew? People allege she's the sort of front... Well, he's got me scared now after that.
Because of libel stuff?
After that libel stuff.
No, but actually you've got a point insofar as...
Allegedly she's a puppet.
There's always a suspicion, isn't there? It's the same with young actors, child actors, or child prodigies, like that boy who used to be on the Antiques Roadshow, who could sort of, and you just think someone's behind the scenes making a lot of money out of this child, and that's always a suspicion, isn't it? But I'm not saying that of Greta Thunberg, obviously. No. I wouldn't dare. Anyway, we're going to move on now. Who better to take us through this one from the Mail, the Generation Z's top spokesman, Nick Dixon?
Yeah, so this is, they've gone with forget a company car, where's my soy milk? And this is Generation Z's top job demands include flexible hours, birthdays off, a good coffee machine and plant-based milk. And this is quite interesting. Access to a life coach was one of the funniest ones. And some of them are quite reasonable, like flexible hours. You go, yeah, OK. And some of them, like getting your birthday off or plant-based milks or cakes and pastries on a Friday.
Okay.
I mean, come on, guys. Or free fruit. How much is fruit to buy? It's like 9p. But can I just give the serious part of it is that if you're in this generation, and I don't know why I'm saying it's like it's just them, because it's me as well, and you can't afford a house. And as Steve Bannon says, you're basically Russian serfs who are sort of better dressed. You can't afford a house. You can't have a traditional family unit. You can't have one income that will get you a family anymore. You've got no meaning. You're in the collapsing West. I can understand that you sort of negotiate and go, OK, well, I can't get any of those things. What can I get? OK, some soy milk. So that's the sort of rationale.
You know, part of me always thinks with these kind of stories, it's just people having a go at younger people again, isn't it? A little bit, Josh?
That's what I'm saying. I'm making the case for younger people that in the position they're in.
Oh, you're happy with that?
Yeah, whatever, man. You know, 100% of young people don't want to work as hard or whatever. Like, that's human beings.
Actually, when we were young, we didn't want to work.
No one wants to work, but you just turn up, you do what you're told, and hopefully you learn, and then people die who are older than you, and you get their jobs, and that's the way it works. And then you...
This is perennial, isn't it? Yeah, everyone always has a go.
Well, you guys are Generation X, so you're sort of more hardened than ironic. I technically am a millennial, so I'm slightly more sort of emotionally crippled. Then the generation, or sort of, you know, volatile. Then Generation Z, they just don't want to do anything.
What about the ones below them?
The alphas.
Alphas, right.
Yeah, I mean, they'll just be ultra spoiled, just...
No, I don't think so. I think it's turning the other way.
Yeah, I reckon they're going to be ultra-conservative.
They are going to be, like, hardcore workaholics. Like, they're just going to take over the world.
Yeah, anti-woke.
My 13-year-old is like, Dad, do you have any books about, like, business and stuff?
Wow.
But it's because they're spoiled in a sense. They have all these resources and they're ultra-aware parents. So, yeah, I agree, actually. They'll be they'll be like sort of Will Smith's kids or something.
I think they'll react against the current...
But 5% want a meditation room.
Do they?
Yeah, which is great. Just go to a meeting and sort of close your eyes and pretend you're thinking. That's the way I do it.
12% want beanbags.
Well, we haven't seen beanbags for a while.
Do you know what an annual duvet day allowance is?
I don't know, but I want a part of that.
Does that mean they bring a duvet in?
You get an allowance for your duvet. You get, like, some money
day
to buy a
means
duvet.
stay at home
Annual
in the
duvet
sheets.
day. Is that what it is?
Yeah, so we just have a day at home doing nothing. Like Morrissey spent the day in bed. They just want to have a day lying in bed at home.
All right, enough duvet chat. Right. Let's move on to the Telegraph now and to a top attraction just opened up in Birmingham. One of the city's highlights, this.
This is mental. 60 bollards installed outside school to put off parking parents. Right, that is a problem outside a lot of schools. I've got a school on my corner. They've installed cameras where you can't drive down that road for certain hours a day. Makes sense. Let's protect kids and keep pollution away from schools. All good. But what they've done is they put these 60... bollards, and here we go. It makes no.
Why do you need them all in the middle of the road?
Like somehow it's going to protect from like some thin car that was coming down the road. Just put them on the outside, so it's just it looks like an. First of all, it's an eyesore. Secondly, if you're riding a bicycle, it seems like
people running around.
It's a hazard.
There's going to be a lot of testicular collisions.
And what a waste of money.
Unbelievable. Nick, thoughts?
Not really. I mean, it's just a nothing, isn't it? But yeah, it's the council going mad. It's the collapse of the West, Andrew. What can we do except plant pointless bollards?
Is it an art installation?
Could be.
Maybe that's what it is. But that wouldn't justify it because it would be bad art, wouldn't it?
The problem is you get people working on the councils who just are idiots.
Well, they've got to use their money up, otherwise they won't get the same budget the next year. That's probably what it is. Anyway, that's the end of part 3 on that cynical note. Coming up, Nick will be proving why all major scientific breakthroughs have ground to a halt, and Josh will be demonstrating why he's wrong. It's going to be quite the battle. See you there.
With a test tube.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
And welcome back to the final part of Headliners. Let's jump back into it with The Telegraph. Nick, with this question, is science over?
Yep, soz. Major scientific breakthroughs have ground to a halt, study finds. So they're saying that no one takes risks anymore in science, and also people over-specialise. And we are in this very technical world now where I can understand that. You don't get a Da Vinci anymore. But where you do, people are saying breakthroughs often come when people draw on diverse knowledge from different sources. A good example is Aubrey de Grey, the guy who's trying to cure aging. He was a computer scientist who changed to biology, and it gave him a kind of outsider view. You could say Donald Trump, disrupted politics. I know he's not a scientist, but this thing about crossing disciplines allows you to be
That
more...
was a good crossing discipline you just did.
Thank you. And it allows you to be more well, I've crossed into serious commentary from comedy. That's why I'm so good. But this is the problem. People are only getting these incremental gains. There's also this sort of academic problem. Well, there's also this thing of the science. People don't like real science anymore. They like the science, this fake science. But also this idea of publish or perish, which you have in all academia, where you have to keep publishing pointless papers just to, keep your job, and it's all nonsense. So there's a lack of real innovation.
There's a problem. I think you're absolutely right that interdisciplinary studies are the way innovation occurs. But when it comes to this, there are major problems with, scientific bodies, scientific journals, universities, because there's so much ideological capture. Yeah. They're actually not really interested in the pursuit of truth anymore, and we're not really going to get the discoveries we once could. Is that a fair point?
Yeah, it's a fair point. I'd sort of fight against it a little bit. I'd say there have been some massive discoveries. There was the iPhone, audiobooks, the lamps, you clap twice. We discovered recently that there are more than two sexes. So there's a lot of scientific
some
discovery.
really amazing breakthroughs that we're doing
but
there.
It is interesting about how it seems like a lot of it is because it seems like people are focusing or specialising more on stuff, which means they have more to read than they had 50 years ago. And this is why, actually, part of the reason why I didn't end up as a rabbi, because it was easy to be a rabbi back in the day because you were just one of the first people writing stuff. But the more you go on, the more you have to study, and it gets harder and harder because you've got to study everybody before.
Were you really going to be a rabbi?
Yeah, I got kicked out.
I didn't even know you were Jewish. I'm so sorry.
But surely specialisation... I think Nick's right about interdisciplinary study. It was Kenneth Williams who talked about specialisation. He said specialisation means that everyone gets better and better at less and less until in the end someone is absolutely brilliant at nothing. And I think that makes a good point in a comedic way. Anyway, we're going to move on now to the Metro.
You did a good impression of Kenneth Williams.
Well, I can't do his voice, unfortunately. That's what
that was pretty good.
Anyway, we're on to the Metro now with an article that surely negates what we've been just discussing.
This just proves utterly. The bionic penis has arrived as scientists unsheath synthetic willy tissue.
Oh, why are we talking about
Finally, so this is where I was over Christmas.
Yeah.
Being performed. So it's a bionic willy. It can restore erectile function. Essentially, it's sort of almost like a boob. It's not about the size, but it's like a boob job for willies, if that makes it.
And they've tested it on pigs. This makes me nervous.
They didn't call me a pig. But yeah, they have taken it because anatomically we're very similar.
Well, speak for yourself.
Curly willies. And but essentially, it can repair, because it talks about here people being having problems from sex, but also from machine accidents. I don't know what machines...
Or cars.
Dolls, or car. I don't know what people are doing with these cars.
Let's leave that.
Anyway,
let's not...
Whatever, but essentially it can help fix the tissue. It's like sort of almost like a silicone thing.
So it's a breakthrough, if people have had accidents and do have damaged genitals...
It's an important breakthrough, and about half of men between the ages of 40 and 70 experience some form of erectile dysfunction. On this panel, it's 2/3. But don't ask me how I know. So I'm so sorry. But yeah, and it is.
I'm the one with 5 kids, so I know I'm pretty safe.
Good point. And now you're done. But yeah, and it's funny they tested it on Chinese miniature pigs with injured penises, which is also the name of an indie band. But I'm sorry.
All right.
Everything I said.
We've got to move on before something bad is
more.
said. No. Thursday's Mail now. Yet more incredible scientific breakthroughs with this one, Nick. What's this?
This is trying to stick to your New Year diet. Turn the music down.
What?
So this is nonsense, really, but people are more likely to opt for unhealthy snacks when listening to songs at a high volume. So they're saying that if supermarkets play music louder, people are going to suddenly eat junk and they're going to eat greasy, unhealthy stuff. When louder music's played, the purchase of greasy and unhealthy food increases 20%.
How does that work?
I think it's not the music. I think it's that you're drunk and you're getting a kebab, probably more likely. But
is it that you've been in a disco and the music...
It's called scientific discovery. More.
If you really want the answer, Andrew, it's because you're in a state of excitement, stress or arousal, harking back to the last story. And it's really, it's a bit of nonsense. I mean, the main reason people are eating bad stuff is, you know, greed. Also, there was a good thread on Twitter. It's also the reason people are putting on weight now. It's compared to like the 50s and 60s. It's like eating out a lot, seed oils, processed grains, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, so I think this is probably a quite niche point, but fair enough.
I think it's interesting how, but also like places like Whole Foods shops and stuff like that play very like quiet.
So maybe kebab shops should just play Enya.
Yeah, exactly. Or McDonald's.
But then no one would buy the kebabs.
But that's better for people.
No, but it's not better than a kebab shop, is it?
So listen in the supermarket, see how high...
No, but the government could mandate that kebab shops play Enya, and then people will become healthier and the NHS will be more supported.
Yeah, but then the economy's going to tank.
Yeah, but Enya's going to be on a winner. Think of all those
so
PRS...
play Enya in a health shop and AC/DC in the kebab shop.
OK, right, we've solved it. Let's move on to the next story now. This is another scientific discovery about sleep. Josh, what's this one?
Never ending. 8 hours sleep, and you must eat breakfast. So this is the truth between 10 of the biggest health beliefs. I have had 3.5 hours sleep. That's true. I got it in 3 in the morning, and I woke up at 6:30. So I am functioning. And this is quite interesting, is that it says that actually you do need 8 hours sleep, and if you don't, you operate about 9 years older than you are.
OK, but what about... Because I do get 8 hours sleep, but it's often divided up. So I normally have 4, then I'm awake for 4 hours, then I have another 4.
No, that's not good.
Is that not good?
I
Why
don't
not?
think so. I think you need...
It's how he won the war.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
he
It's good
won
enough
the
for
war.
Churchill, and he had a bottle of champagne for breakfast, right?
And you have it about 2 p.m.
For brunch, normally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
I think that you need the full 8 hours to be, like,
But
regulated.
I can't sleep continually through.
You just wake up, write a book.
I wake up and I normally get some writing.
Yeah, well, good for you. Humble brag.
No, it's just the truth.
No.
You asked the question.
Fine. The point is, there's interesting things here. Lifting weights will make you bulky. That's not true.
Isn't it?
Breakfast is the most important meal of the day, not necessarily intermittent
lifting
fasting.
weights does make you bulky, because remember Arnold Schwarzenegger?
No, because it's all about if the repetitions and how heavy the weights are. And some, like, people who are toned, like athletes, they just want to be, like... They want to get strength.
You have to do it a lot slower as well if you really time on the tension. But yeah, it's talking about 10,000 steps a day, also a bit of a myth, because one problem is that you do some cardio, then your NEAT reduces, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which means you move around less naturally. If you do a load of cardio, your body will adapt, and then you'll just sit there not moving, because it knows.
10,000 steps a day doesn't help.
No, it says here it is. It says it does.
It can help, but I'm just adding my own knowledge. It can help, but it can be overblown.
OK. I think we've got time for just one story if we do it very quickly. Forget the discoveries of Oppenheimer. This surely supersedes it. What's this?
Yeah, this is skim picking. So this is about Kurt Steiner, the world stone skimming champion. And it's a growing sport, apparently. And you compete for the title of top tosser.
Is that what it says?
That's in the article.
There is a quote. It's a quote from the article.
It's also Josh's nickname.
What does it say again?
That's a coincidence. And this Steiner guy says, in this world where we're too much in our devices, he likes to replace his phone with a piece of rock because it's primal, which was quite cringe.
Well, that is, unfortunately, all we've got time for. So, look, I'm going to be back with Headliners tomorrow at 11 o'clock with Roger Monchouse and Leo Kearse. Remember, Headliners will be repeated tonight at 1 a.m. and again at 5 a.m. And if you're an early riser and you're watching the repeat right now, stay tuned for The Breakfast Show, which is on just after the break. Farewell.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Good evening. Well, the Prime Minister comes out of hibernation and makes 5 big key pledges. Will he deliver on them? What's the likely impact on the opinion polls where they've been having a very, very bad time? We'll look at that. We'll also have a look across the pond at the farce that the US House of Representatives is descending into. And on Talking Pints, I'll be joined by John Conte. He was, of course, back in the 70s, light heavyweight boxing champion of the world. And I'll be asking him, what makes you a champion? Maybe a lesson for all of us in that. But before we get to the show, let's get the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Nigel, thank you. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. In his first major speech of the new year, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak set out his government's key priorities. He pledged to halve inflation, grow the economy, stop illegal immigration, reduce the national debt and cut massive backlogs in the NHS. He even told the public to hold him to account if those waiting lists in England do not fall in 2 years' time.
Those are the people's priorities. They are your government's priorities, and we will either have achieved them or not. No tricks, no ambiguity. We're either delivering for you or we're not. We will rebuild trust in politics through action or not at all.
Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson said Labour also have plans to tackle the small boat crisis. Sorry about that, some technical difficulties there. The Royal College of Nursing accused Mr Sunak of being detached from reality following his speech. Its leader, Pat Cullen, says the pressures being faced by the NHS could not be blamed on COVID or the current high levels of flu cases. She says health leaders believe that staff shortages are the root cause of the issues. Nurses are preparing to go on strike again later this month after joining the picket line for the first time in the RCN's history last month. The Prime Minister also touched on the ongoing rail strike, saying his government's door is always open for dialogue with unions. It comes on the second day of the first of two 48-hour strikes by rail workers, with over 40,000 RMT members walking off the job over paid jobs and conditions. Train drivers in the ASLEF union will strike tomorrow, followed by a second 48-hour RMT strike on Friday. And author Faye Weldon, best known for her novel The Life and Love of a She-Devil, has died at the age of 95. She published more than 30 novels during her career, as well as short stories and plays written for TV, radio and the stage. She was also one of the writers on the popular 1970s drama series Upstairs, Downstairs. Her family say she died peacefully in her sleep this morning. TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Now it's back to Faraj.
It must be the mild weather. I thought the Prime Minister was in a big winter hibernation. We wouldn't hear or see of him for ages. But no, today he's out giving a big speech, the biggest speech thus far of his time as Prime Minister. I guess he had to do it, really, because Keir Starmer is delivering his big speech tomorrow. We woke to the news. The story that had been leaked to the national media was that one of the big events in today's speech was going to be that we'd all have to learn mathematics at school till the age of 18 because the Prime Minister wants to improve people's numeracy. I've never heard such a load of old baloney in all my life. Believe me, X and Y and algebra and trigonometry do not help you become numerate. Now, I've got a far better idea. If you want a numerate country, teach everybody from the age of 16 how to play darts and do the mental arithmetic to get down from 501. That would be far more constructive than making 18-year-olds do maths, a subject in many cases which they will absolutely hate and loathe and probably bunk off from. But after that, we got the big pledges. And maybe if you've been out busy all day, just hear what Rishi had to say. These are the 5 promises.
We will halve inflation this year to ease the cost of living and give people financial security. Second, we will grow the economy, creating better paid jobs and opportunity right across the country. Third, we will make sure our national debt is falling so that we can secure the future of public services. Fourth, NHS waiting lists will fall and people will get the care they need more quickly. Fifth, we will pass new laws to stop small boats, making sure that if you come to this country illegally, you are detained and swiftly removed. So, 5 promises. We will halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists and stop the boats. Those are the people's priorities. They are your government's priorities, and we will either have achieved them or not. No tricks, no ambiguity. We're either delivering for you or we're not.
I thought for a minute it must be Tony Blair, the people's priorities. But I have to say, in terms of delivery, Rishi Sunak is no Tony Blair. But what about the pledges? I'm joined by Liam Halligan, GB News' business and economics editor. He's going to halve inflation this year.
I think it's pretty clear that inflation will be probably about half what it is by the end of the year. It's currently 10.7% in November. I think almost everybody, including the Office of Budget Responsibility, thinks that inflation will be about 4 or 5% by the end of the year.
Is this the inflation that when he was Chancellor they told us wouldn't happen at all?
That's right. It's going to be transitory. Look, all these pledges, I was a bit disappointed by them, if I'm honest. Rather than like setting himself up for failure, he's almost guaranteeing himself success in his own terms, because the way the pledges are worded, they're sort of probably going to happen anyway. Like on small boats, an issue that you often highlight here on GB News. Yep. He's not saying what's going to happen. He's just saying he's going to pass a law. Of course he can pass a law. He's got a majority in the House of Commons. Of course he's going to pass a law. And also, on debt as well, he says debt's going to start falling, but then we have to hear from other ministers, not him, myself and Tom Harwood today. We finally managed to learn that that's, in 5 years' time. So I don't think these pledges were particularly difficult. I don't think there was much leadership here. I just think he was setting out a load of criteria that are probably going to be met anyway. I think almost everybody thinks inflation is going to go down a lot this year from the current 40-year high.
Well, you say that, but actually food inflation figures from December have been a bit of a shock today, haven't they?
They have. The food inflation figure for December, it's not an official figure, it's the British Retail Consortium. Okay. It's 15% inflation on fresh food. So fresh food in December was 15% more expensive than it was in December 2021. And this only goes to highlight, Nigel, what you and I have been saying for many, many months now. The headline inflation figure, 10-11% across all goods and services, that's a sick joke to people on lower incomes who are disproportionately spending on food, fuel, clothing and housing costs, their rent and their mortgage if they're lucky enough to own a house. They've gone up a lot more than 10%. Headline inflation is 10-11%. The real world inflation for most people is much, much higher.
Now, growth. Number 2, growth. You know, he's going to stimulate growth, and he talked later on in the speech about us becoming a great innovation economy, all of which made me wonder why they're bashing small business as much as they are. Are we in recession, yes or no?
I think it's almost certain that we're in a recession. A recession is 2 consecutive quarters when the economy gets smaller. GDP, as we call it, gross domestic product, contracts. Officially, GDP did contract in the 3rd quarter. That's July, August, September. We don't know about the last 3 months of last year yet, but I'd say it's almost certain that we do have at least 2 successive quarters now of negative growth. So we are technically in recession. I do think, though, that this year, while recession will continue, it will be shallower than recessions of the early 90s and certainly a lot less than the recession which followed the 2008 financial crisis.
If by Q4 there's anemic growth in the economy, he can claim that he's achieved that goal.
He can, but the Bank of England is saying there's going to be a recession for the whole of the year. But again, he's only saying that he's going to have growth by the end of the year. Yeah. So again, that's almost nailed on. And when I read the papers this morning, we're going to learn about maths. I like maths. I'm the governor of 2 schools. A lot of my undergraduate degree was in mathematics. I'm a mathematician. And yet, if you're at home and you're wondering if your kid can buy a house and you're thinking about how to pay your electricity bill and the credit card bill, what do you really want for your 16 to 18-year-old? You want them to learn to be a plasterer, a bricklayer, a plumber, skills that actually turn into, bankable jobs going forward, things that we need people to do. It just seems to me slightly hectoring, slightly out of touch that a very highly educated, extremely wealthy man is telling people from 16 to 18 that they need to learn more maths. Yes, of course, we have a lot of, functional illiteracy in this country. But if you're going to teach people maths, don't teach them trigonometry and algebra at 16 to 18. Teach them about what a mortgage is, how to read a bank balance, how to run a small business, how to fill in a VAT return. These are the things that people really need to learn.
And play darts for mental arithmetic. I'm not wrong, am I?
Everything. But then you see the patterns, don't you? 161 finish. We all know it's treble 20. Treble 17 ball, right? We all know that. Right?
Reducing the debt, this is nonsense. All they're talking about actually is reducing the amount of debt we borrow. The national debt will go up every single year, won't it?
Yeah, it's as a percentage of GDP. Look, I think it's absolutely right that we're trying to lower the national debt. I'd much rather that we lowered the national debt by reining in spending to some degree rather than inflating it away by having high price rises to make the debt go away in real terms. Our national debt is too high. But again, I don't think it's particularly ambitious, Nigel,
because of the way
to rein in to say we're going to have the national debt not smaller, but just falling. It could get bigger for 4 years and then fall a little bit in the 5th year.
Yeah,
it's a lot higher than now, and he's met his pledge. Tick.
Yeah. Where he has set the bar rather higher is reduced waiting lists for the National Health Service and this, passing legislation. If you come here illegally, you will not be allowed to stay. I suspect the legislation he passes will not pass that 5th test. And in terms of cutting the NHS waiting lists, that's a big ambition, isn't it?
Well, it is, but again, NHS waiting lists now are officially about 7.1 million. I personally think they're much higher than that. Why? Because I talk to many, many GPs in my job, not just for GB News, but the other things I do in the media. And a lot of GPs tell me that there are now big administrative barriers for them to refer patients in a bid to keep waiting lists down. Look, we had very little elective surgery during lockdown, almost uniquely in the Western world. Our National Health Service became a national COVID service. I think that was a massive mistake. So just by dint of the fact that our NHS is now a lot less focused on COVID, they will start hammering away and start addressing that backlog, getting down from 7.5 million. So I don't think it's actually that ambitious just to say we're going to get the NHS waiting list down. He should have set a bar. He should have said we're going to get it down to a certain point. And here's another thing.
Well, we'll see.
You now have Wes Streeting, Labour's Shadow Health Secretary, who's making, he's addressing something that's almost impossible to talk about in British politics. We need to actually reform the NHS. And Rishi Sunak today is all about, I'm giving them extra money. I'm giving them extra money. Not a word about reform in that speech.
Well,
not
what he said is we have challenges in accident and emergency. No, we don't. We have an emergency. Liam, before I let you go, before Christmas and afterwards, I've been talking about this 25 to 30p gap that has emerged on the forecourts between the price of unleaded and the price of diesel. Also, people are getting their bills through, their gas bills through, the electricity bills through. They're quite shocked in many cases what the numbers are, yet the price of gas actually has fallen now, hasn't it?
It's very, very interesting, Nigel. The price of both oil on international markets and wholesale gas on European markets, both those major metrics are now below where they were when Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine in 24th February 2022. And I tweeted during the holidays that 86p a barrel and $76 a barrel and 76 euros per megawatt hour. Oil and gas are now below where they were before that invasion. And yet, diesel, when you fill up your van or car on the forecourt, is 20 to 25% more. And also, we all know what's happened to our electricity bills since then. And of course, at least 40% of electricity in the UK is naturally derived from gas-fired power stations, and then almost all other electricity, the price of it, ridiculously, in my view, is still pegged to the price of gas.
Who can give us some answers on this?
I've been burrowing away at this question for a long time, Nigel. I do not understand, as the economics and business editor of GB News and a national newspaper columnist, why our electricity prices are linked to the price of gas, and why, when the price of gas has come down so sharply since the summer, that electricity prices haven't come down too. I don't understand. I ask lots and lots of questions, but no one gives me straight answers.
I love the honesty of that, but we're going to keep digging, aren't we? We're going to keep digging. We will come back with answers.
I think you and I, between us, need to get to the bottom of this, because if we can't, what hope have the punters at home got?
On that note, Liam Halligan, thank you very much indeed. In a moment, we'll have a look at the state of the polls for the Conservatives, and I'll ask the question, today's speech, today's promises, could it turn things around for the Conservative Party?
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock with GB News.